Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The morning sun filtered through the large windows of the Harrison Market supermarket, illuminating the immaculate aisles and meticulously arranged shelves. Every product seemed to be in its place, every employee performed their tasks with almost military precision. Everything was designed to impress, to entice, and to project an image of accessible luxury. In this immaculate setting, Ethan Harrison, the store manager, adjusted his perfectly white tie and strode through the aisles with an air of superiority. A man in his 40s, with a stiff demeanor and piercing gaze, he liked to think he could instantly discern who deserved his respect and who didn't. Even today, he felt ready to remind everyone who ruled this retail kingdom. At the entrance, the bell rang, announcing the arrival of a customer. This customer, however, was not just anyone. Aaliyah Johnson, a 19-year-old black student, entered the store with a satchel full of notebooks and pens, ready for her day of classes. She walked confidently, but caution guided her every step. She knew all too well the suspicious glances, the unspoken judgments that some dared to make about her even before they knew her. When she politely asked Ethan to help her find a specific item, he stared at her suspiciously. He narrowed his eyes, frowned, and in an authoritative voice, made a humiliating remark in front of all the customers present. "You shouldn't be hanging around here. This kind of article isn't for everyone." The murmur of the customers grew louder. Some exchanged surprised glances, while others discreetly took photos. Aaliyah, however, remained motionless, her face expressing an almost cold calm. She had learned to endure this kind of behavior, to not let pride and hatred of others dictate her emotions. She knew one thing: the man humiliating her today didn't know who she truly was. She was the daughter of Malik Johnson, an influential figure in the city, owner of a restaurant chain and a respected philanthropist. But Ethan would never have guessed that truth. In his arrogance, he believed he was in control, completely underestimating the consequences of his actions. Aaliyah calmly walked away from the counter, holding her head high and her eyes shining with silent determination. Each step echoed a promise: today's humiliation would not go unpunished. And in this tension, invisible to Ethan but palpable to those who were observing, was born the beginning of a lesson he was not ready to forget. The supermarket was always bustling, but that morning, an invisible tension hung in the air. After the brief, humiliating exchange with Ethan Harrison, Aaliyah Johnson walked down the aisles with a mixture of anger and determined calm. Every glance directed at her seemed judgmental, but she refused to give in to fear or shame. Ethan, standing behind the main counter, never missed an opportunity to show his authority. He observed Aaliyah from afar, frowning at every movement. "I don't like what I see," he whispered to an employee, Samantha, who was clumsily trying to calm the situation. Samantha, young and nervous, knew that her boss could be cruel. She approached Aaliyah gently, with an embarrassed smile and a compassionate look. "I'm sorry for what he said, you didn't do anything wrong," she murmured. Aaliyah nodded, grateful for the gesture, but she didn't want Samantha to put herself in danger. "Thank you, but it's not your fault," Aaliyah replied calmly. "I'm going to handle this my way." Every word was measured. She had grown up in an environment where arrogance and racism could strike without warning, and she had learned to protect herself through dignity and self-control. Despite his restraint, the customers nearby were beginning to notice the incident. Some were whispering, others were discreetly taking out their phones to film. The air was thick with a mixture of curiosity, unease, and judgment toward Ethan. Ethan, absorbed by his own power, was completely oblivious to the dynamics unfolding around him. He believed his authority and position as headmaster were enough to crush any opposition. But what he didn't know was that Aaliyah was no ordinary girl. She possessed a silent force, an invisible network, and a sharp intelligence that allowed her to transform humiliation into power. As she left the aisles with her purchases, Aaliyah took out her phone and began discreetly taking photos and videos. Each image captured not only the injustice, but also the manager's arrogant and humiliating behavior. She knew that one day, this evidence would speak for itself. Meanwhile, Ethan Harrison, convinced that everything was under control, returned to his office, unaware that the incident had just marked the beginning of an event that would shake his reputation and force him to confront his prejudices. That day, in the middle of the supermarket filled with customers and employees, a silent but powerful lesson began to take shape. Arrogance and contempt for others always come at a price, and Aaliyah was ready to make them pay, one way or another. Back home, Aaliyah sat on the edge of her bed, surrounded by the notebooks and books she used for her university studies. The soft morning light filtered through the curtains, a stark contrast to the turmoil she had just experienced. Despite the comforting warmth of her room, a cold anger lingered in her mind. She relived every word, every gesture of Ethan Harrison, every insult he had hurled like a dagger at the customers and his employees. She knew that an impulsive reaction would be pointless. Crying or shouting about the injustice wouldn't change anything. Aaliyah was determined to turn this humiliation into strength. She took out her phone and watched the videos she had recorded. Every frame, every shot captured not only the principal's arrogance and racism, but also the dignity with which she had responded. This evidence was more than just a document, it represented her resilience. In her reflections, she recalled the words of her father, Malik Johnson, which he often repeated to her: "Dignity is the first weapon of the weak against force." She did not need her father's immediate intervention. She wanted first to learn to defend her dignity on her own, to make Ethan Harrison understand that he could not humiliate someone without consequence. Aaliyah took a deep breath and began planning her next move. She drafted a clear message, detailing the incident and the humiliations she had suffered, and saved it in a secure folder. Every word was carefully chosen, every sentence weighed to have maximum impact when she decided to use it. She also considered the consequences. Her actions had to be beyond reproach, no one could question them. Aaliyah knew the power of truth, but also knew that the world would be quick to judge a young black woman against an influential white man. As she wrote down her plans, a strange feeling mingled with her determination: fear. Not of the man who had humiliated her, but of systemic injustice, of invisible yet omnipresent prejudices. But this fear wasn't paralyzing, on the contrary, it galvanized her. She knew that to protect her dignity and assert her worth, she had to act with intelligence and courage. Before going to bed, Aaliyah saved all her evidence, took one last picture of herself with her determined look, and whispered, "One day, he will understand, and on that day, the truth will speak." That night, in the silence of her room, Aaliyah wasn't just sleeping to rest, she was mentally preparing for the battle that was about to begin. A battle for justice, for respect, and to show that arrogance and contempt always come at a price. In his spacious and elegant office, Malik Johnson was reviewing reports from his restaurant chain, but his mind wasn't really focused on the numbers. A message on his phone caught his attention, a text from his daughter, Aaliyah, which simply read, "Dad, things went badly at the supermarket today. I want to talk about it." Malik frowned. He knew his instinct and his natural authority. He couldn't remain indifferent to an injustice done to his daughter, especially when it involved racism or public humiliation. Without hesitation, he called her immediately. "Aaliyah, tell me exactly what happened," he said in a calm but firm voice. On the phone, the young woman described the scene in detail: the manager's arrogance, his unjust accusations, the way he had humiliated her in front of the customers, and the discomfort felt by some of the employees. Malik listened attentively, feeling a cold but controlled anger. He knew that intervening impulsively would risk making him lose his temper and jeopardizing the situation. "I understand, and I'm proud of you for keeping your calm," he said finally, "but it's time for justice to be served. I'll help you prepare for this, but let me guide you so that everything is impeccable." Malik knew his influence could bend Ethan Harrison to his will in an instant, but he didn't want to resolve this through direct intimidation. He wanted his daughter to understand the value of dignity, strategy, and intelligence in the face of injustice. It was a subtle but powerful lesson. True strength lies not only in power, but in how it is used. While he was talking with Aaliyah, Malik began gathering information. He consulted his contacts in the community, reliable journalists, and even civil rights lawyers. Every detail would be useful in building a solid case. He knew that Ethan Harrison, in his arrogance, wouldn't grasp the gravity of his actions until confronted with tangible, public evidence. Meanwhile, Malik discreetly observed the activity around the supermarket. He knew that a place's reputation depended as much on its image as on how it treated people. Harrison's arrogance and disregard for other customers and employees were already starting to sow tension among the staff. Malik took note of everything. These details could become powerful evidence of the man's systematic behavior. That day, Malik Johnson, despite his position of power and influence, chose to remain in the background to allow his daughter to grow stronger. But he knew that when the time came, he would intervene with all the necessary authority to protect her dignity and make Ethan Harrison understand that one does not trifle with the honor of others with impunity. In the quiet of his office, Malik concluded his thoughts. She is ready. And soon, he will understand that a girl's dignity can never be trampled on without consequence. The next morning, Harrison Market was bustling as usual, but a strange tension hung in the air. Customers murmured, exchanged intrigued glances, and some cast insistent looks toward the counter where Ethan Harrison reigned supreme. The manager's arrogance hadn't changed, but the perception of his authority was beginning to waver. Meanwhile, the video Aaliyah had discreetly filmed the day before had begun circulating on social media. A few supermarket customers had shared it on their accounts, shocked by the manager's humiliating behavior. Within hours, the video had reached a wide audience. Indignant comments, messages of support for Aaliyah, and scathing criticism of Ethan Harrison. Ethan, meanwhile, was completely unaware of the storm that was brewing. He spent his days supervising the aisles and subtly humiliating certain customers or employees whom he deemed unsuitable for his establishment. "I don't understand why some employees are looking at me strangely. Everything is fine here," he whispered to Samantha, the employee who had tried to defend Aaliyah. Samantha, feeling uneasy, felt the pressure mounting. She knew the customers were unhappy, but feared the manager's retaliation. Yet, some customers were now daring to whisper their criticisms aloud. "This is unacceptable, this guy has no respect," said a man, pointing at Ethan. "I saw the video online, he should apologize publicly," added a customer. Ethan Harrison, still convinced that his position as director protected him, began to feel a slight unease. He didn't understand why the whispers and glances had changed. For him, the world was still supposed to function according to his personal hierarchy, him at the top, everyone else below. Meanwhile, Aaliyah, aware that her video was gaining visibility, was considering her strategy. She knew that public attention was a powerful weapon. Every supportive comment strengthened her position and showed that the humiliation she had suffered would not go unnoticed. "I must remain calm, but I must also be ready to act," she thought as she reread the comments. The contrast was striking. Ethan, arrogant and oblivious, thought he was in control, while Aaliyah, calm and methodical, already saw the consequences looming. In his office, Malik Johnson also observed the unfolding situation, silent but attentive. He knew that the time for direct intervention had not yet come, but that the pressure was already beginning to mount on the director. This chapter of history revealed a simple yet powerful truth: arrogance and humiliation can backfire on the perpetrator, especially when the dignity of a righteous person is at stake. Aaliyah, with patience and strategy, had transformed injustice into a force capable of bringing about unexpected change. After several days of observing customer reactions and the circulation of her video, Aaliyah realized it was time to formalize her approach. She knew that public outrage was powerful, but only legal action could truly secure her rights and ensure that the humiliation inflicted by Ethan Harrison would have concrete consequences. She contacted Jordan Matthews, a lawyer renowned for defending victims of discrimination and public humiliation. Jordan, a calm and methodical man in his 40s, had a reputation for being both strategic and tenacious. He received Aaliyah in his office with seriousness, listening attentively to her story. "You did exactly the right thing by remaining calm and documenting the evidence," he said, while flipping through the images and videos. "Now it's time to turn this humiliation into justice." Aaliyah felt a mixture of relief and determination. She knew that with Jordan's help, every move would be planned, every word weighed. Together, they analyzed the videos, customer testimonials, and the manager's systematic behavior toward employees and customers he deemed undesirable. Jordan explained to Aaliyah the different options available: filing a formal complaint for discrimination, requesting a public apology, and possibly seeking symbolic damages. He emphasized the importance of remaining professional and measured, so that the matter would never be called into question. "The key," added Jordan, "it's because you never react with anger. Anger can weaken your case. Your dignity and composure are our best weapons." Aaliyah nodded. She knew her father, Malik Johnson, was discreetly monitoring the situation, but she wanted to demonstrate that she could defend herself. This chapter of her life was a lesson in independence and courage. Meanwhile, in the supermarket, Ethan Harrison was beginning to feel the effects of his own arrogance. Customers were openly discussing the incident, and some of the criticism had already reached the local media. Tension around the store was rising. He didn't yet know that the next step would involve a direct confrontation with the law and with the girl he thought he had humiliated without consequence. Aaliyah, for her part, was preparing methodically. She wrote a detailed account of the incident, gathered all the evidence, and scheduled a meeting with Jordan to finalize the complaint. Every document, every image, every testimony would be a building block in the construction of her future victory. This chapter revealed a crucial truth: dignity is not defended solely through patience and composure, but also through strategy and deliberate action. Aaliyah transformed humiliation into a tool for justice, paving the way for her right to respect to finally be recognized and protected. A few days later, Malik Johnson decided it was time to intervene, but not directly. He knew Ethan Harrison and knew the best way to strike would be subtle and calculated. Under the pretext of checking certain aspects of the store for a fictitious business partnership, Malik went incognito to the Harrison Market supermarket. He first observed the staff and customers. Ethan continued to rule his space arrogantly, issuing orders, correcting employees, and criticizing every gesture deemed inappropriate. The customers who had witnessed the incident with Aaliyah murmured amongst themselves, some still shocked by the viral video. Malik, standing in a corner, analyzed every detail: the director's tone, his gestures, his expressions. He noted the subtle fear among some employees, the impatience and frustration of the customers, and above all, the blatant arrogance that persisted despite the social storm that was beginning to form around him. At one point, Ethan approached Malik, unaware of his true identity, and said condescendingly, "Can I help you? Please make sure not to disturb my employees, they have serious work to do." Malik replied with a calm and polite smile, perfectly concealing his true intention. "Thank you, I simply wanted to observe how you manage your establishment. I am curious to see the level of service and organization." While Ethan guided him through the aisles, Malik continued to observe. He saw Samantha and other employees glance furtively at him, some seeming relieved to see a patient and respectful customer. But Malik knew that the real test was Ethan himself. When the manager made another condescending remark to a customer, Malik subtly intervened, asking a question that made Ethan slightly waver. "Are you sure everyone is treated fairly here? Even those you might consider unsuitable?" Ethan, surprised by Malik's calm and confident tone, hesitated for a moment, as if he sensed he had just encountered an unexpected obstacle. This simple, though discreet, exchange marked the beginning of an inevitable confrontation. Malik had begun to show that he was not an ordinary customer and that the dignity of others could no longer be ignored. Later, after leaving the store, Malik called his daughter to discuss his observations. "I saw him up close, he's even more arrogant than I thought," he said, "but it has shown cracks, Aaliyah. And soon, we will exploit those cracks to uphold your dignity." In this chapter, the tension ratcheted up a notch. Ethan Harrison, still unaware of Malik's true identity, began to sense, without realizing it, that his behavior had imminent consequences. And Aaliyah, supported by her father, was preparing for the final confrontation where the humiliation would be turned against the one who had inflicted it. The supermarket was still bustling, but the air felt heavier, thick with whispers and furtive glances. Ethan Harrison strolled through the aisles with his usual air of superiority, unaware that the shadow of his defeat was approaching. What he didn't know was that Malik Johnson, the father of the young girl he had humiliated a few days earlier, had just walked through the door. Malik walked calmly towards Ethan's desk, his steps measured and his gaze steady. There was neither anger nor haste in his demeanor, only a natural and quiet authority. Ethan looked up and, not recognizing him, gave him a condescending smile. "Can I help you?" asked Ethan, confident in his power. Malik placed his hand on the desk, a slight smile on his lips, and replied in a clear and firm voice. "I am Malik Johnson. You may not know me, but I am Aaliyah Johnson's father." Ethan's expression hardened. His eyebrows rose, his lips parted, and a heavy silence filled the room. The name vaguely rang a bell, but he never would have imagined that the girl he had humiliated was the daughter of this influential and respected man. You are Malik Johnson," he stammered, unable to hide his astonishment. Malik nodded slowly, his piercing gaze fixed on Ethan. "Yes. And I am here to seek justice for my daughter. She was humiliated in your store, in front of customers and your employees, and this behavior is unacceptable." He handed over the videos and documents that Aaliyah had carefully collected. Each image showed the arrogance and humiliation inflicted by Ethan, irrefutable proof that the incident was not isolated but indicative of his systematic contempt. Ethan stepped back slightly, a flush rising in his cheeks. For the first time, he realized that his arrogance had left him in a vulnerable position. Fear and panic mixed with shame crossed his expression. I didn't think that it would have consequences," he tried to say, but Malik calmly interrupted him. "You should reflect on your actions, Ethan. Arrogance and contempt have a price. My daughter deserves a public apology and concrete measures to ensure this kind of behavior never happens again." The employees, alerted by the confrontation, watched the scene from the aisles. Some whispered among themselves. The powerful man they had always respected had just revealed that he knew the victim personally and that he would no longer tolerate injustice. Cornered, Ethan felt the weight of his own arrogance and foolishness. Everything he had considered power and control was now turning against him. Malik, in control of the situation, remained calm, firm, and imposing, allowing Ethan to realize the magnitude of his mistakes. That day, the balance of power shifted. The humiliation inflicted on Aaliyah would now turn against the one who had inflicted it, and Ethan Harrison understood, too late, that underestimating the dignity and strength of others was a mistake he would pay dearly for. The supermarket was plunged into a heavy, almost palpable silence. Employees and customers alike stared at Ethan Harrison, unable to hide his embarrassment. Malik Johnson's revelation had hit the manager like a hammer blow. The man he thought was just a customer or a stranger was in fact the father of the young girl he had humiliated. The videos and evidence that Aaliyah had carefully gathered were now before Malik and the staff. Every gesture, every contemptuous word, every act of intimidation that Ethan had used became irrefutable proof of his arrogance and discrimination. The humiliation he had inflicted on Aaliyah was now backfiring on him. Ethan tried to maintain his composure. I can explain," he stammered, but his voice betrayed his panic. Malik, motionless and calm, looked at him with quiet authority. "You received explanations, but it wasn't enough. The humiliation you inflict on others has consequences. You will issue a public apology and take the necessary steps to ensure this never happens again." Outside, several customers had filmed the confrontation, and the footage began circulating on social media. Outraged comments poured in. Thousands of internet users denounced Ethan Harrison's behavior, applauding Aaliyah's strength and dignity. The supermarket's reputation began to falter. In the aisles, Samantha and the other employees watched the scene with a mixture of relief and pride. For the first time, they saw the man they had long feared lose his composure, confronted with the truth he had ignored. Cornered, Ethan realized that his position of authority no longer offered him any protection. The humiliation he had inflicted on Aaliyah was now turning into a public humiliation for himself. He felt powerless against the combination of evidence, witnesses, and Malik Johnson's influence. Aaliyah, standing back but present, observed the scene with majestic calm. She knew that justice wasn't measured solely by words, but by the power of truth and dignity. Her father, at her side, offered silent but powerful support, and together they had transformed injustice into victory. In this chapter, the lesson was clear: arrogance and contempt for others can backfire on the one who displays them, especially when the victim acts intelligently and strategically. Ethan Harrison had just discovered how much he had underestimated Aaliyah Johnson's dignity and strength. A few days after the confrontation, the matter took on a more official dimension. With the help of Jordan Matthews, a specialized lawyer, Aaliyah filed a formal complaint against Ethan Harrison for discrimination and public humiliation. The evidence, videos, testimonies from customers and employees, was irrefutable. The case was solid and left no room for excuses or minimization of the facts. Ethan Harrison, now fully aware of the gravity of the situation, found himself summoned before a board of directors and legal representatives. His former arrogance had given way to visible anxiety. The judgmental and disapproving gazes of others followed him everywhere. "Mr. Harrison," Jordan began, calmly but firmly, "you are here because your actions have damaged the dignity and reputation of a young customer. Your apology and behavior are required to rectify this wrong." Ethan stammered, searching for his words, but Aaliyah and Malik's presence made any attempt at manipulation impossible. The images and videos shown during the hearing clearly demonstrated his humiliating behavior, arrogant gestures, and contemptuous remarks. Every move he had tried to downplay now backfired. Under pressure, Ethan finally gave in and apologized. I apologize to Aaliyah Johnson. My behavior was unacceptable, and I deeply regret humiliating her in front of customers and staff. But apologies alone were not enough. The committee also imposed corrective measures, mandatory training on respect and equality, increased monitoring of its interactions with customers and employees, and public communication on the supermarket's commitments to the fair treatment of all. For Aaliyah, this moment represented far more than a personal victory. It was an acknowledgement that dignity and justice could triumph over arrogance and injustice, even against someone who believed themselves above the law. She had not only defended her honor, but she had also paved the way for others to avoid the same fate. Malik, standing beside her, smiled proudly. He had never doubted his daughter's strength and wisdom. "You have shown remarkable courage and intelligence, Aaliyah. Today, you have demonstrated that dignity and truth are more powerful than arrogance." Aaliyah felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction. The humiliation had been transformed into justice, and the lesson for Ethan Harrison was now clear: underestimating someone because of their skin color or status is a mistake whose price can be immense. This chapter showed that justice and truth always triumph in the end when they are defended with courage, strategy, and dignity. A few weeks after the confrontation and the official proceedings, the Harrison Market supermarket had changed. Customers and employees were still talking about the incident, and Ethan Harrison's reputation was now tarnished. Social media continued to share the video, but this time it was accompanied by articles praising Aaliyah Johnson's courage and dignity. Ethan, pressured by the committee and public scrutiny, had begun a necessary transformation. The mandatory training and measures imposed by the committee had forced him to understand, albeit reluctantly, that respect and equality were not optional. Although the public humiliation had left a lasting mark, he had begun to behave more respectfully toward customers and staff, aware that his every action was now being observed. For Aaliyah, the victory was far more personal and profound. She had faced arrogance and racism with calm and strategy, transforming the humiliation she endured into a testament to her strength and dignity. Her relationship with her father, Malik Johnson, had deepened. He had been a discreet but constant guide, allowing her to act intelligently while maintaining her independence. During a quiet evening at home, Malik and Aaliyah discussed everything that had happened. "You learned a valuable lesson today," said Malik, his eyes proud. "Dignity, patience, and strategy are more powerful than arrogance and hatred." Aaliyah smiled, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and relief. She knew that this experience had made her stronger, more aware of her own worth and that of her community. She had shown that one could defend oneself without violence, but with determination and intelligence. Meanwhile, Harrison Market was trying to repair the damage to its image. Ethan Harrison, now more humble and cautious, finally understood that power doesn't reside solely in position or authority, but in respecting others. Every customer, every employee, every interaction now had to be treated with care and fairness. This final chapter revealed a universal truth: justice and dignity always triumph, even in the face of arrogance and humiliation. Integrity and courage transform obstacles into opportunities for greatness and respect. Aaliyah, proud and serene, could now walk with her head held high, knowing that she had not only defended her own dignity, but also left a lasting lesson to those who thought they could humiliate with impunity.